Hi guys, this is a beginner's crochet tutorial for a granny square. Granny squares are sometimes what people actually learn with, so they're very, very simple. The way I do a granny square is I do 2 rows of each colour and I do 3 colours and then I do a border colour. So if you want to pick 3 different colours, you can do that. If you want to change it up and do one solid colour or a different colour for every row, you can do that as well. It's totally up to you. So to begin, I'm going to be using completely different colours, coloured yarn for each section, just to make it easier to tell which is which and to see what I'm doing. You can use any kind of hook size. I have a 5mm and a 5.5. I'm going to go with a 5mm hook. If you use a smaller hook, you'll have a smaller square, and if you use a bigger hook, you'll have a bigger square. Right, so this is how I start. So, take the tail of your yarn, grab it in your left hand if you're right-handed, and your first 2 fingers, you have to wrap it around and kind of crisscross it and wrap it back around like this. Okay, so you've just done that. Hold on to that, and with your hook, go under the first loop, I would call it. Grab that string there that's going across on top, grab that and pull it through. So it's that kind of motion. I'll do it again. So grabbing the tail, wrap around the finger, the 2 fingers, crisscross it like so, and then going under that one, grabbing this one and pulling it through. And when you take your fingers out and pull, that is a slip knot. So from here, I'm going to loop the wool or the yarn like this behind those 2 fingers. That is how I hold the yarn. You can do it whatever way is comfortable, but that is the easiest for me because it keeps it secure and allows you to feed it through. So I go like that, and I grab the little tail with my hand. So this is the bit you're working on, and this is the tail where you're going to just keep it secure and so that your work isn't flapping all over the place. And the first thing we need to do is we're going to chain 6. So this is a chain. So holding the little tail, you're going to kind of put your hook underneath and you're pivoting all the time. So we're starting like this. See how the hook is facing you? And you're going under that and you've kind of pivoted. You'll get used to it. There's no particular rule, but the way you turn your hook is going to allow you to grab this. So holding onto that knot, you're going to grab that with the hook and pull it through the loop. And that's 1 chain. So you're going to do it again, underneath and grab. That's 2. So the way the hook is pivoting there, I'm turning it around to grab, and I'm kind of using the point to sort of help it through that loop. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to bring it a little bit closer. This is the slip knot at the very start. So you're ignoring that. This first loop is your first chain, and I want you to turn your hook, push it through that loop. Okay. Pivot your hook again. Grab that with your hand so it doesn't move. So pivot your hook again. Grab that yarn, the working yarn, and pull it through the loop you just put your hook into. Just grabbed a little bit of the thread, but don't worry, just be careful not to break the thread. So you've grabbed it and pulled it through, and keep going and pull it through the one that was already on your hook. So that is a slip stitch, and now you've joined the chain of 6 and you've made it into a little ring. So now you're going to start on, it's handy to have one here to show you. You're going to start on your first cluster of 3, and I am going to be using US terminology, so I am going to call these double crochets, and in each cluster you have 3 double crochets, and that makes that. And then you do a little gap and do another 3 and a gap and another 3. But when you're at this stage, the way you start off the very first cluster is by chaining 2. So just what you did at the start. 1 and 2. So that chain that's the only time we do that, is at the very start of the row when you don't have any double crochets yet. That is going to it's going to count as a double crochet. So it's a chain 2, and we're going to call it your first double crochet, because when you do your first double crochet, you're going to see that it's the same length. So this is how you start off your cluster, okay? So that's a chain 2. And this is a double crochet. So holding everything steady, I'm still holding the tail and I'm holding where I'm working, and I'm kind of helping that into a loop. So you see the gap, you see the circle there, and I'm going to be going into that gap. I'm not going to be going under stitches or through stitches, just into the hole. And a double crochet is, I yarn over, that's a yarn over, and I insert the hook right into the middle, and I come up behind there, grab that yarn again, and this time I pull it underneath there through the gap where I just went in. So now I have 3 loops on the hook here. So I yarn over again, and this time as I pivot the hook, I'm going to bring it through 2 loops, and that means I have 2 loops left. And I do it again, I yarn over, and I pull it through those 2 loops. So I have 1 loop left. And if you look at it, this is your first chain 2, and this is your first double crochet, and they are the same height. So that is why a chain 2 is counts as a double crochet, because it is the same height. And to just start off with a double crochet, it would make it an odd shape. That's why we have to do a chain 2 to begin with. So we're going to do another double crochet. So I yarn over again. I go straight into the middle of the circle. I grab the yarn and pull it through. So I'm pivoting the hook each time just to bring it through the way I want it to bring it. So now I have 3 loops. I yarn over again, and I'm catching the yarn like this, and I'm pivoting the hook. I'm going to pull it through those 2 loops. I'm going to yarn over again and bring it through those 2 loops. Now that is your first cluster. Between at the very start, I'll put this down for 1 second. So at the very start, you don't have any corners. All you have are 4 clusters and a gap in between, and it's kind of a circle. So to make corners, you need to chain 2, and that gives you space then on the next row to put in 2 clusters, and that will create your corners. So I will show you on the next round. That is going to really be when it's going to take shape. So at the very start, we have the first cluster. So we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. And that will create your corners for the rest of the square. So now we're going to go straight into the next cluster, and because this is not our first cluster. We don't have to chain 2 to make that fake double crochet. We're going to start straight away with a double crochet. So yarn over, insert into the middle, grab that yarn and pull it through. I have 3 loops on the hook, so yarn over again and pull it through 2 loops. So I have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over again and pull it through the last 2. So now you can see that's my first cluster and a gap and my first double crochet. So I'm going to do 2 more double crochets. Yarn over, insert the hook, grab the yarn, pull it through, and just give yourself a little bit of slack on the yarn. Okay, don't have it really tight or it'll be hard to work. Yarn over and pull it through 2 loops, and yarn over and pull it through another 2 loops. So I have 2. I'm going to do 1 more double crochet for this cluster, and you can rewind and go back as many times as you need to. So I have 2 clusters of 3 double crochets. Now I need to do the next corner, so I'm going to do chain 2, and I'm going to do another cluster. So that's 1 double crochet, and that's 2 double crochet, and pull through 2, pull through 2. That's 3 double crochets. Now I have 3 clusters. I'm going to chain 2 again. 1, 2, and I'm going to do the last cluster. I'm just pulling the stitches up to give myself room. So you can do that as well if you're finding it's getting a bit tight. So I'm going to do 1 double crochet. Oops, give myself a bit more yarn. So 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets, and finish off by chaining 2. 1, 2. So I have 4 clusters, and the way I join them together is, just loosen this up so you can see. This is the original chain 2, and if you look right at the top, kind of hard to see, but right here, if you hold it sideways, you can see 2 loops at the top of every stitch. So if you turn it like this, under the 2 loops, there's a little hole with another strand. So if you insert your hook right into the little hole, grab the yarn, pull it through, and then pull it through the one on your hook, that is how you slip stitch that all together. And that is your first row. Okay, now that you have had the chance to rewind that and learn how to do that very first row, we can move on to the second row. So just looping my yarn again on my fingers. Now it helps to see, if you can see your 4 clusters clearly, and point out to yourself where the gaps are. Now we need to start crocheting your corners, and as you can see, we are nowhere near the corner. So we have slip stitched into here. The way to get over here, where we need to start working, is we're going to go right into the next stitch, into the same little hole there, under those 2 loops, into that hole, grab the yarn and slip stitch to there, and again straight into this gap, not into any stitch, just into the gap, and oops, grab the yarn and slip stitch in there. So now we are where we need to be. Now it's the start of the row, oops, and that means we need to chain 2 to be our fake double crochet at the start. All right, let's carry on. So this is the corner. Double crochet, so this will count as number 2. Pull through 2 and pull through 2. And this is double crochet number 3. Okay, now we chain 2. 1, 2. And into the very same hole, the gap here, the chain 2 space it's called, we are going to do another cluster. So that's 1 double crochet, 2, and 3. And that's our first corner. Now to get from one chain space to the other chain space, all we need to chain is 1. We don't need to chain any more than that. 1 gets us from here to here. So we've chained 1 and we're going to go straight into our next cluster. So that's 1 double crochet, US term, and 2, and 3, and now to make the corner, chain 2 and 3 more double crochets in the same space. 1, 2, 3. And to jump over to the next chain space, chain 1, and then straight in here with 1 double crochet. And you'll notice that I have sped up a little bit. So if you're still having trouble with the double crochets, don't worry. Go back to the start and just keep rewinding and pausing it and do it at your own pace. And when you're comfortable enough, you can move on. And that is how I learned. I learned by watching YouTube over and over again. And now it is in my brain. So your second cluster up here in this corner, it's 2 and 3. A little bit more slack there. So chain 1, and for the last, and just open that up a bit, for the last corner, do 1 and 2 and 3, chain 2, make sure there's enough room there to work with. Just watch out for that tail, it's in the way there. Your last cluster, 1, 2, 3, chain 1 because we need to still create the gap over to here. Find the top of your very first chain 2 there, insert, oh, can't see it as easily when I look at the phone screen, so I have to look underneath the phone. Insert your hook, grab the yarn, pull it through, and then pull it through the loop on your hook. Ooh, it's tricky. Okay. And this is where we are going to snip the yarn, because I'm going to change colour, so I'm going to leave that much so I can sew that in later. And then I'm going to grab that tail and put it through that loop and pull. So now we do have a little baby granny square. So you can see that's our first row of 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters, and I've added a corner there, a corner there, a corner there, and a corner there. 2, 4, 6, 8 clusters on row 2. And now I'm going to change colour. So you don't have to, you can keep going like that. If it's your first time, maybe do keep going until you have a few more rows done and you're really good at doing it, and you don't need to pause the video anymore. So just keep practicing. I'm going to switch to a really different color. So I usually do close colors. As you can see, I kind of fade them outwards like that. But just for this, I'm going to just kind of use very different ones. Now, when I'm changing color, I create the slip knot that I created at the start. So I wrap that around my fingers, crisscross it, and then go under that one, grab that one, pull through, and then take out the fingers and pull that tighter, not too tight. Okay, so let go of that tail. So I have a slip knot on the hook, and I pick this up, and I usually go the opposite side to where I finished there, just so that tail isn't annoying me at the start. So I'm going to find any chain space, not the corner for this one. Just keeping it simple by starting with 1 cluster. So I'm going to go into this chain space. So that's on my hook. I'm going to insert the hook, grab the yarn, and then slip stitch it on. So now it's just back to normal. The start of the row, no matter where you are, is always the chain 2. Okay. Afterwards, you'll be sewing in all these ends. Now, some people actually, they grab the tail and they just place it on top as they're going along, and that hides the tail. But I find that no matter what, that tail is going to find its way out again, no matter what I do. So I always sew mine in at the end. It's just much more secure. So that's our first chain 2. So keep going. It's exactly the same as the row before it, just doing extra stitches. So I'm not doing a corner here. I'm just doing 1 cluster. I'm doing a chain 1 to get over here. Now I do my corner. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and another 3 in the same space. And I really am speeding up a little bit here because you're probably speeding up too. So chain 1 and skip over to this middle chain space, which is not a corner. So I'm only going to do 1 cluster in here. 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and then chain 1 again, skip over here, go straight in with 1 double crochet, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and I'm going to do another cluster, and that creates the corner. 1, 2, and 3, chain 1. So now I'm at where my tail is, so I just want to keep that out of the way and don't get that tangled up in my work, because I'll be sewing it in at the very end. So that's a normal cluster, chain 1 to skip over to this corner. That's 1, 2, And oops a daisy, chain 2, another cluster to create the corner, 1, 2, 3, chain 1, do 1 cluster on its own in the middle here, 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and you need 2 clusters for the last corner, 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, oops, 3 double crochets, chain 2, and do another cluster in the same space. So that's 1 and 2 and 3, and then chain 1 to join it over here, slip stitch into the top of your first stitch. Okay, and again, if you're continuing in this color, you need to slip stitch it into the next. So see where that is there? So we slip stitch it straight into the next one under those 2 loops, and then slip stitch it into this chain space, and you're ready to go off again. And the first stitch of the row is always chain 2. So off you go. You can see that it is a square. So you can go as big as you want. You can make a blanket out of it. If you go bigger and bigger and bigger, you can make several squares like this, whatever size you want, and make a blanket that way as well. Or you can make little table mats or anything like that. And that is a simple granny square, and I hope you were able to follow along. Let me know if you have any questions, and happy crocheting.